Going to be covering, as Tracy said, blanket agreements and Dunning Wizard. So these are two slightly smaller modules, still very useful, but they didn't necessarily have enough content for me to split them into two separate webinars. So let's start with our blanket agreement. We'll jump into the system right now. If I can just get out of here. Get out of here. Okay. So a blanket agreement can be both on the sales side or the purchasing side. And today I'm going to cover the sales side specifically, but you can think of all the features and functionality being translated to the purchasing side too. I'll try to speak about both. Basically, it's an agreement between either you and a customer or you and a vendor to sell or buy a specific volume of items or a specific amount of sales or purchasing, so a specific volume of sales or purchases. And it will track this agreement through the blanket agreement. So again, I'm going to use a sales blanket agreement today. So under sales, you'll see sales blanket agreements. And this form here, you start by naming a specific business partner. In this case, it's a customer. You're going to see this increments normally like any other form. And to bring your attention here, the agreement methods. So the two primary methods are items and monetary. So the items method is more like you're going to buy these specific items in a specific volume, i.e. quantity, or you can buy these specific items with volume and a specific price, or you can just do a monetary method, which is an agreed upon volume of sales with you for a specific period of time. So I'm not going to cover the monetary method as much, but you can see it's much more simple to set up. You basically set up a monetary method and you set up a planned amount. You can incorporate a specific discount over that period of time if you wanted, or just use this for tracking against the specific volume. So this will flow through to a fulfillment report, which I'll show you later. So if you have, specific volume levels with customers, or your vendors require you to get specific volume levels for rebates, this is a good way to track it if it's not specific to any items. With the item method, it's what I'm going to show today. It's a little bit more complex. You can have specific items here. You can set a planned quantity, and you can also set a specific set of unit prices that you can tell the system to use or to not use. So under this form here, the agreement type, if it's a general type, then it's just generally for volume. So you can see here, ignore prices specified in blanket agreement. But if you do a specific item agreement type, you can also specify price levels that this particular customer, or again on the purchasing side, that you as the customer of the vendor would receive for the period of the specific blanket agreement. So I'm going to just show a specific one because it kind of shows off all the different features. The settlement probability you can use for reporting, remarks, you can put information in there. The primary things you need to set are status. I'm going to set this to just approved because I know in this case I just want to demonstrate it. We'll say for the period up to December, and I'm not going to set a renewal, but you can set a renewal here in order to prompt the customer to renew, and then you would make a new one each year. So this is a periodic agreement for some sort of volumetric tracking. So that's the purpose of this. So you can say, we agree to buy $100,000 worth of your products non-specifically at no specific discount, and then if we make that, we will get a specific rebate, and you can say renewal, remind me 10 days before the ending date, or remind me 30 days before the ending date to renegotiate if this is something that's ongoing. So for the details here, I'm just going to add the first three items. I'm going to say simply 10, 10, 10. Obviously these can be much, much higher, much different combinations of items. And I'm going to set a set of custom unit prices here, 150, 250. So because I am using a specific item method, this unit price will actually override all of the other pricing mechanisms in the system. And I'll show you that quickly when I actually make a delivery from this blanket agreement. So this is what you need. I'm going to click Add. I'll put webinar example here. I mean, this can be whatever. It's just for your own information. So I've added that. Now you can see you have a planned quantity, and the system will now track this particular agreement. So from this, you can also copy to a specific document. So I'm going to make this really easy. Copy to a delivery. You can see the items are here. You can see that because there's one primary blanket agreement set up for this customer, you can just, it'll automatically use the default blanket agreement. There is the potential to use multiple. I'm not going to demonstrate that right now, but assuming that it's kind of a one-to-one relationship, it's going to default to this. So you're going to see that, and it's going to set these unit prices how I set them in back here in the agreement. So this is nice if you have a specific price level and volume. Again, this is not required if you do a general type item. This would apply the other pricing source mechanisms as we discussed in a previous webinar. And then you'd see the price source here very clearly as the blanket agreement. So I've just jumped to a delivery. Potentially this could go to an order and then go to a pick list. This would also just appear if they're doing their own ordering. You don't have to start from the sales blanket agreement. I'm just making it really easy on myself for the sake of this webinar. So I've added that, and periodically you want to come back and see. You would be able to see if there were partial fulfillments. Obviously these are really low quantities, round, easy numbers for the sake of demonstration. But you can imagine you would be able to come back through here and report very easily on what is planned and what is being fulfilled. And you can kind of check periodically, monthly, or however the business scenario requires for you to be meeting those criterion for either giving rebates or receiving rebates or setting discount levels for particular customers or vendors. So along with that, you get every single document relating to this particular blanket agreement. So it's very easy to come through, track this, see the history, see the pacing, and look at every document or create other crystal reports for analysis and or queries. So again, it centralizes this idea of tracking volume or prices based on some specific agreement. We also have the ability to do attachments, perhaps the signed blanket agreement and or other pieces of information here. Makes it easy. And also recurring transactions. So if this is something that is, done every month for a particular order and it's just set to recurring, you can build those into the sales blanket agreements and associate them here, and you would see that those would be auto-created. So that's a topic for another webinar, but it incorporates itself into the recurring transactions mechanism, allowing you to set standard, repeatable sales orders or other documents where it would appear, and a user would be in charge of recurring transactions, and they would actually add those transactions based on a specific period of time, and then that would roll right into your sales blanket agreements. So this all kind of feeds into the blanket agreement fulfillment report. So in this case, again, because I'm using a sales side, I'm going to go to sales reports and then blanket agreement fulfillment report, and I'm going to use item method and run it for that. So if you're using this for a specific period of time or however you're going to run it again with the different business scenarios, you can see very clearly who's fulfilled it and who has not fulfilled it. And also, again, to track on the purchasing side, if you should track down a vendor for rebates if they're not tracking it as carefully as you are. You can always make sure that you run through this, analyze this, and again, if customers don't make specific promises that they have signed, you can, bump them down a distribution level or renegotiate specific pricing or volume agreements with them, and that's the purpose of this whole thing. So that is basically all that I have to show here for the blanket agreements. We have a detailed PDF for you to go through that will give you much more specific detail, but I wanted to just talk about the business kind of use cases and the general overview of it. Tracy's going to mail out a PDF with this webinar that will go more into depth, and there's more to show. So the other feature that I wanted to show, which it doesn't really warrant its own entire webinar, but is also useful to know about and to see, will be the Dunning Wizard. So in order to set up the Dunning Wizard, and you might be saying, what is Dunning? Well, as far as I can tell, it's a kind of an Old English word that's just like collections. So you can think of Dunning as, like a slap on the wrist kind of thing for the purpose of collections. So, you go through and you might be sending out customer statements, but the Dunning Wizard is the next step in the evolution of this process. So we're going to look at the Dunning terms. So Dunning terms allows you to set up specific levels and specific types of letters to be sent at different times. So the Dunning letter 1, say, would have its own layout, Dunning letter 2, 3, etc. So there's up to 10. So you could have various types or escalations of Dunning in terms of collection. So Dunning letter 01 might be something like, hey, maybe you've already paid, but we're just letting you know you're overdue. So that would be 30 days. Then once you had sent a Dunning letter, in this case we've set it up 1 letter per business partner. Once you've sent that 1 letter, 30 days after that, it'll automatically escalate to level 2. So level 2 might be a little bit more aggressive, and then 30 days after that one, you would get letter 3, which could potentially be collections or some sort of more aggressive wording. So you can also do fees for a letter. You can also charge balance. You could do minimum interest level applications here. To be transparent, I don't know of too many businesses that can effectively do this with actual posting of interest and fees, but SAP Business One can automate it. So you can literally say, and I'll show you the Dunning Wizard in a second, you can literally say like, we're charging you $2.50 administration fee or $20 administration fee, and you automatically can post that to a real AR invoice if you want to. So if that's applicable to you, then you can do that. So let's jump into the Dunning Wizard. So like most of the other wizards, say the Payment Wizard, it basically centralizes and allows you to make selection criteria to automate these processes. So I'm just following through these. It's very basic. You can see for the various terms and levels, you need to select your business partner by some sort of criteria. This is a standard window. In this case, I have a very simple demo system, so I'm going to use them all. I'm not going to include credit memos, not based on invoices or journal entries. I'm just going to keep it really simple, but there's lots of different options. So in this case, we can see that all these particular business partners are on the level 1. So it'd be, you could send this, and the way I have it set up is just 1 letter per customer. So even if there's various levels within here, various levels of due, it's going to say, hey, you have one past 90 days or past 30 days, and it's going to give them that 30-day level 1. Then it's going to time it in the system, and you'll see that centrally in the business partner once I run this. Then it'll time it, and then 30 days later, it's going to suggest the next one to be bumped up to level 2, etc. So I'm just going to do this for a couple. You can see like the Payment Wizard has all the different details. It'll show you the last dunning date, and I had some, but I didn't include them in here because they're still timing the next level, but you have last level update, last dunning date, document amount. Do you want to do automatic posting? So if you had said yes and this was set up, you can set interest and fees to go to specific GL accounts, and this will actually post AR aging AR invoices for you that actually will be due, so that will automate that process, and it'll give you the fees and all the information you need to do this. In this case, I'm assuming, it's more of just the next step after your customer statement. So in this case, I'm going to print the dunning letters on exit. So I'm just going to print this to a PDF, call it letter 1, and I just have to load this up here and close this. So you see that this is a Pld layout. This is just the default one, and this is, basic information. This happens to be in French. I forgot to switch it actually, but there's an English one too, and it'll show you the documents with the totals, and it just basically kind of says, not a super aggressive way that you owe money. And in the system, there are several different levels of letter already, both in a Pld and a Crystal Reports format, so you can do both of those in there. So if we look back, so I'm going to go to Mike. You can block dunning. Say you've come to some agreement with myself, and you said, well, we're going to pay you by X date. You can block further dunning letters from occurring because you've sorted things out for that specific for the specific invoices or specific payments that you're going to do. Or you can also block it on the invoice level. So if you look back at Mike here, I can say Dunning History Report, and this is going to run it through here for this particular one. And it doesn't look like I have a very good credit history with this, with my company here. So you can see previous dunning letters sent, and if you look at the particular invoices, if you want, you can actually block dunning letters on a specific invoice as well. So you can say, well, we've settled on this particular invoice, but this customer is still subject to future dunning letters if necessary. So that's basically it for the Dunning Wizard. There is a more detailed PDF as well, and we can send that if you need it. The last thing I'm going to show as a bonus is how to do customer statements, kind of relating to the Dunning Wizard. So I have a couple extra minutes here. Financial reports, accounting, aging, customer receivables aging. So if you're familiar with this, all the customer statements come from this particular area. So we're going to do a customer statement. You can select which ones you want to do, or you can do every single customer. And then basically all you would need to do is either preview this or email it and select your customer statement, one per page or one total to be printed out. So this is a good way, if you're not going to do dunning, you can print your customer statements right from here, and that's another good way of handling your collections. That's all that I have today. Are there any specific questions or comments?
And questions on Dunning Wizard or the blanket agreements? We had quite a few this morning.
Sorry, Mike, this is Catherine from Hermont. Concerning the blanket agreements, I think I missed the part where I think you were showing a report.
Okay.
Could you just show me that again and where it was?
Absolutely. Sure. So in the case that it's a sales agreement versus a purchase agreement, there's one for both. Sales reports, blanket agreement fulfillment report.
Okay.
So the blanket agreement fulfillment report has, a lot of different options. You can run it for whichever method, and it'll just show you for the period of time and the customer selected what was fulfilled and what was not fulfilled.
Oh, okay, good. And once it's fulfilled, can you delete that off of the list, or does it stay there forever?
Yeah, so what you would do is filter out the status. So what you would probably do only is approved. because this is going to, if you're going to do a historical analysis, you might need all the status, but in this case, I didn't really show the end game of this. Like basically once it's done, you would terminate it, and basically that would kind of finish it off, and then you could duplicate it, but terminating it gives you a termination date and say, okay, well, it was done on this particular agreement, December 31st, 2017. And then when you run the fulfillment report, you can just do only for approved and active or whatnot.
Okay, so could you go back to that, the general there in that blanket agreement you had for Mike?
This one? Yeah.
Okay, so say you wanted to change you fulfilled it, so it came to the end of the year, it's done, and you wanted to do it again, the exact same one. Can you just change the dates, or do you have to do another one?
You would have to duplicate it.
Okay.
So you could duplicate the contents of it and then basically just set a new end date. So it's not onerous in terms of recreation, but each agreement is for a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah,
So once the end date arrives, you can't go back and change it again to another end date?
I don't believe so, no. Once it's, I don't know, maybe if I put it on hold? No, I don't think so. No, it's locking. When you create it, it's actually locking the end date.
Okay. So if you wanted to do like a blanket agreement, this year, once it's fulfilled, start another one each year, you'd have to do a new one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could potentially set the end date out further. I only have a very brief kind of overview of the scenarios that you're kind of looking to solve. But potentially you could set the end date out way further, maybe for the life of a particular unit. But also we were discussing a service module solution for kind of what you're looking to track, if I'm understanding the business case scenario there too.
Yeah, well, it's just that blanket agreements were suggested to us.
Okay.
So that's why I'm trying to look into it, because my knowledge of blanket agreements was in, as you first stated, for sales and purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not for necessarily tracking this type of unit.
Okay. Yeah. For tracking the unit, we could talk about equipment cards that track by serials, and then it allows you to transfer between technicians and etc. So we can talk about that offline too, or if you're talking to Chris, I talked to him yesterday a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to play around in this because I see maybe some potential, but
yeah,
I could see where it could get cumbersome, and you'd have like tons of blanket of agreements in there.
I know, and this is where the drawbacks I've seen in actual business case analysis is, if it's for hundreds of customers, it doesn't necessarily make sense because you're already setting up a price level structure, and then they're already doing their volume. You can just analyze it for a sales purpose at the end of the year, and you could say, well, these people are making the volume that we agreed to. You could just put a UDF on the business partner for a particular year or whatnot, instead of doing this. But for very large, maybe large customers with very specific agreements, I think it's very useful where it's saying you need to buy this specific amount and at a specific price. So some very specific negotiation for a select group of customers, I think it's very useful, and or for vendors, for yourself, if you have to make specific levels to get rebates, I think that's where it's useful. But for bulk customers and vendors, like I said, I think the management of it becomes worth less than the actual ability to have it in SAP and do a crystal report to track the same information. Or in your case, the service module, where you have an equipment card and then you service a particular item, and then it has just, you increment it to the next service date, or you add a reminder and an activity for the next service date on a service call or something. So
yeah, we do use the equipment card for the real equipment that we sell.
Yeah. Okay.
But because this would be about 200 different customers, so
yeah.
Then that's
There's also
too cumbersome.
Well, there's also special prices. I don't know if you saw the last webinar, but there's also special pricing. So you can do special pricing for a particular group. If you get Tracy to send it to you, if it is a pricing thing, you can do just a special prices or discount group for a particular group of customers, or you can do special prices for a specific set of customers if that's what you're doing, and then you can copy it between customers. So That might be
No,
another.
it's not pricing, it's really shipping a unit out on a swap and then being alerted that they're due to swap it again the following year.
Okay.
And it varies per customer when that is, so that's why
Okay.
I guess they
Well,
suggest this.
yeah, I mean, I'll leave it with Chris. If we want to flesh out the business process and throw around some ideas, we can definitely do that offline, but
Okay.
some options.
Okay, well, good. This answered a lot. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Great, you're very welcome.
I want to say something though, guys. I don't know if everybody's comfortable in French. We had the blanket agreement this morning in the French session, but Christophe didn't cover the Dunning Wizard. He really just covered the blanket agreement, and he might have gone a bit deeper down into it. So if anybody wants that French session, I could send you the recording. So do let me know, okay? Anybody could just send me an email. So back to you, Mike.
All right. I think that's about it.
Yeah, this was very good and helpful. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
All right, does anybody else have any other questions? If you don't, our next session is going to be on the 19th. We're going to be covering pick and pack. So that's good. We're still on the inventory theme. So next round is on the pick and pack. So I'll be sending those out in 2 weeks. And I'm going to send you guys the recording of this. As I said, if someone wants the French session, let me know. And I'll also have the document that really goes more into depth on the blanket agreement and what it can do for you. So I'll be sending that out shortly as well. So are there any other questions?
No, but Tracy, I'll take both English and French.
Super. Well, I'll send it to you, and I already sent it to someone else who I know is going to want it. So thank you so much, Mike. That was really interesting. And there's our contact if you need us for anything. You've got the support desk as well if someone wants to have, who has more questions on either the Dunning Wizard or the blanket agreement. So just feel free to use it. It's at your disposal with your maintenance plan. So have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Yep, bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.